the national level. And we are here today with the Vice Provost of Diversity and Inclusion for Purdue University, Dr. John Gates. And he will be talking with all of you about what is happening. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask him. We are here for the next hour or as long as we need to have this conversation. So please, make sure to have your question ready, and there's no, wrong question, right? So please let us know if you have any questions, and I'm gonna pass it over to Dr. John Gates.
Thank you so much, Juan. So I'm delighted to be here to see you all. I've not met most of you. You may know that I came to Purdue in April 1st of last year, so I've been here for about 6 months and getting my feet on the ground here. Among the things that I'm responsible for are the cultural centers. So the LCC, the BCC, ARC, LGBT Center, and NAECC. I'm also concerned with 3 principal buckets, I would say. The first one is student, faculty, and staff success. The second one is recruitment and retention, and the third one is education and training. Within that is climate and culture of the university. So I know that the last few days have been difficult. Obviously we've been engaged as a university in the circumstances. Joining me today, I have one of my colleagues, Professor Williams from Krannert, who also works in my office, but we'll be joined by Mr. David Casey, who is the Chief Diversity Officer for CVS globally. We'll be here in a few minutes to engage in this conversation with you and with us. And so I would encourage you to ask any questions that you might have and to engage in a full conversation. What I can say is this. From what we know so far, there was an incident in which a CVS employee, cashier, asked, according to company policy and what happens in America, a student or a person, a customer, to show his ID for the purchase of cold medicine. Jose showed his ID, a Puerto Rican driver's license, and the cashier did not recognize that the Puerto Rican driver's license is valid, and apparently perhaps that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Well, that is unfortunate, but I would suggest that many people in the United States do not fully recognize that Puerto Rico is part of the United States and that a driver's license from Puerto Rico is valid. We understand that Jose offered his passport, which also was not accepted. And so we can have views about that, right? What is reasonable and what is not. I can tell you that from the perspective of CVS, and I have been in deep conversation with CVS, the Chief Diversity Officer's daughter is a graduate of Purdue, as is his wife, and I've known him for many years. So we were able to just have a straight conversation. And so I said, "What's up?" Right? And he's like, "John, she didn't know." Right? She straight up didn't know. And what CVS has done since is to, working with the family as well, is to issue a national apology on its social media sites. They have issued an apology to Jose through his mother, and his mother wanted CVS to ensure that all employees across CVS's 10,000 stores across America were retrained, and that is happening now, right? CVS issued a policy clarification statement to its employees in all 10,000 stores about this specific issue. That is that Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, that CVS's policy is and has always been, for as long as we understand understand, to accept Puerto Rican driver's licenses, and that US passports are also acceptable. So they're taking that on directly, and part of the conversation now is what is the impact of what has happened over the past few days on us as a community, on your feelings of belonging as a student, and on what the university perhaps can and should do. I will say finally, and then open it up, that I recognize that people want the university to make a statement of affirmation. And I would tell you that if I could make that statement, or if I could direct the university to make that statement, I would, but I cannot. The university is unlikely to make a statement in any way, and that is part of our administrative culture, I'll say. My power only extends so far. So as a university, we will not make a statement, but I want you to know, and I want you to know that the provost, he knows that I'm here, he is the chief diversity officer of Purdue University. Wants you to know that we care, that we empathize with the pain. As an African American man and as a gay man, I know issues intimately. And I also know what the feeling of having your institution not speak in affirmation to the experiences and to the feelings that one may have can be a bit disconcerting. For that, I would say, know that we certainly want to be a caring university, but our stance as a university is that we do not speak on every issue, and often not every social issue. And that is not something I can change. Okay? So, the floor is open. Hi, I gotta put my glasses on.
Hi, I'm Deanna, y'all. I'm the president of First Community. And I just wanted to go over the story a little more.
Sure.
Because maybe it was a matter of she did not know that Puerto Rico was part of the United States, but at the end of the day, there was an attack when you asked somebody for their papers. Regardless, that was the statement. But he was asked for his papers. That is a direct attack. And no CVS employee should have any authority to ask me for money.
So that's something where I think there is some confusion, or at least we don't quite know what the real truth is, right? Because the stories that I'm getting is that he offered his passport, not requested, but offered, because he's accustomed to people not understanding that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. While an offering is different than a demand.
No. He offered his passport. He gave his passport.
Right.
She then asked for his papers.
Okay. I have not seen that. So, Jose would have to speak
Yeah, he has.
for himself on that. That is also, I don't think, is the understanding that CVS has. And so, we can use the opportunity with the Chief Diversity Officer to clarify some concerns in a few minutes.
Hi. Sorry. So, I wish I had more time to prepare questions for this, so if this is like all over the place, sorry. But I think an issue I had with the statement you said is that you can't do anything to push the university to make a statement. I'm confused on what would qualify as something that is important enough to make a statement. And also, like, I as a student, I've been here for 4 years now. People who know me know that, like the people around me were constantly trying to bring change into a campus, like to this campus. And it's just very frustrating to hear that we don't just want empathy, like we want some kind of change. And I don't know how to bring that change, but it's also not my job to know how to bring it, because I'm supposed to be a student first. And I'm sorry if this comes across as very angry, but know. I don't know how to have a conversation like this and like just bring some kind of change. But I myself, and I know students here are just frustrated, and we don't just want empathy. I want to know, how can we keep our administration accountable? And I also typed this out earlier, but how do you plan on advocating for students concerned with our safety and dignity at Purdue? And also, as someone whose job is to recruit students, how can you make sure that students looking at Purdue can say, I have a place here? Because with the news, what's going on and what continues to go on this campus that has happened, this isn't the first time that the administration has not spoken up on things. And this also shows that the students on campus that may hold views that oppress students of color or disadvantaged students, it's showing them that our institution doesn't care. And our institution had, I feel like the university has a huge, opportunity, but also, an advantage to kind of put forth, some kind of, vision for what society should, work towards, and that is a more inclusive society. And what basically this administration has done so far is not that. So I'm kind of I just want to know, how can we keep you accountable, and how do you plan to change this narrative? Because I'm kind of, and again, I'm sorry if this is too,
It's not too.
but it's I'm tired of just empathy, and I would have really appreciated more than just you, someone coming to the LCC to talk to just a small portion of students, because I just heard about this morning. It would have been nice for us to have more time so that we wouldn't just act on whatever you just said. We could have at least prepared a little bit more.
Okay. So I don't take issue with anything you said. I would say that we can meet at any time. We're meeting today because things are happening now, right? This is kind of an emergency. I will be out of town for the next day, and I'm out of town all of next week. So this was the one opportunity, and we didn't want to have no response at all, right? The frustrations. Yeah, I get it. I heard about the frustrations before I came to Purdue. I know that people want me to be that person that brings us together as a collective community, and I would like to be that person, right? Ostensibly, I am, but there are limitations on it, right? So, let's talk about culture. What is happening is that we are a relatively conservative institution. Can we acknowledge that?
Yeah.
Indiana is a fairly conservative state. We are a fairly conservative institution. And there are some things that people aren't comfortable addressing. Part of our challenge is to figure out how to have our needs met within the context of the cultural norm that we have, right? So we have a need for affirmation and for an environment that itself affirms us, right? And we don't get that every day. And in some cases, we feel disaffirmed about the institution, and the institution is silent, right? And that does not feel particularly good. Let me ask you, if we were thinking together, acknowledging our social and political context in which we have to get the work done here, knowing what you know as students who've been here for more than a year, and in my role, wanting to do all the things that are good and proper and that we need to do, but constrained. What is your advice to me?
It's not really a question for me. Like, I'm not,
But here's the issue. If you say that's not a question for me, I'm going to challenge you all back. But you want this to happen, but it's not your role to engage in making this happen? That's opting out. I'm telling you what the climate and culture at Purdue is, right? And you've known what the climate and culture at Purdue is. And I'll get to you. And statements have not been made. And I'm telling you, statements will not be made, right? That may not sound good. You may not like that. But that is the reality, right? And I'm asking you now, given this context, to have your needs met, what might you think I can do or we can do to ensure that the needs of the Latinx community are addressed? Right? If you opt out, that's your prerogative, right? I'm inviting you to opt in. Yes.
So you said that you knew a lot about Purdue before you got here, correct?
Yes,
So you knew about the climate,
I
the
did.
political and the social climate. So I feel like as a diversity and inclusion vice provost, which first I believe that the students of the diverse community should have a say in, but continuing.
I will
that
tell you
should
that the
come-
students did have a say in it, and that every student at Purdue,
all
whether she or
students-
he or they are black or Hispanic or straight or gay, are diverse, including those students that you may not agree with.
I understand it, but I'm
Okay.
saying, me personally, I didn't have a voice in that. I'm not sure if anybody else in this room had a voice in that. I'm
Okay.
saying for the everyday student, I didn't have a voice in that.
Okay.
And it affects the everyday student. And then continuing, I feel like if you knew the kind of climate that was here,
Mhm.
that you should have just came here with it like
And just
right
bust
now
it down.
it feels like right now that you're a part of the administration and you're the part of the administration that's gonna say, hey, we can't do anything, but I'm still here for you. And I feel like in this climate, the vice provost of diversity and inclusion should be standing with the students, saying to the administration that we're not doing this anymore.
I value your opinion. And I disagree. Right? You all have not had a vice provost for diversity and inclusion at Purdue for 5 years. There's a reason that there's not been someone in this role for 5 years. More has happened here in the past 6 months at Purdue in the diversity and inclusion arena than has happened at this institution in the past 10 years. Right? You may not,
You said more what?
has happened in the past 6 months.
More
And the-
positive or negative?
Positive.
So, even mind, body, and soul,
Let me tell you something.
diversity and attributes.
So you have other issues that you want to address. I'm here to address issues around the Latinx community.
Okay.
Now, mind, body, and soul. Here's what I would have you do with mind, body, and soul. Give me a reason why I should fund something for one population solely against all other populations at Purdue, right? Where I don't have any academic imprimatur, where I don't have outcomes that say being in mind, body, and soul is academically advantageous. If you want to have a conversation about give me something, I'm probably not the good person to do that with, right? We can have a conversation about what is needed at Purdue. Today, we're talking about Latinx. Who else?
Sir, just before I go into the tidbit that I had in my mind, we are talking about the Latinx community, but I would say over the past couple days, once we heard about the incident that happened at CVS, it wasn't just members of the Latinx community, it came out, all of us showed up.
Okay.
Because we understand that once this happens to one of our peers from a specific community, it happens to all of us.
Right.
And that's why we're angry, because we see this highlighted amongst a certain specific group of our peers, and then we're being reminded of the fact that these incidents have occurred within our own experiences.
Absolutely.
So yes, we are talking about the Latinx experience specifically, but do also understand that all of us are angry. So,
I get that.
yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Right, so, also just going on, I know you had specifically talked about this. You said that we as minority students and faculty, staff, etc., have to work within the confines of like,
The institutional cultural context.
yeah, the context of this culture that we
Well,
belong to.
I'm saying you don't have to, but I do.
Exactly, and I understand that. That's a very difficult thing to do. But again, you may have a certain limit to the power that you have as a vice provost, but at the end of the day, you do hold, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, the highest position of power amongst all of us in this room.
Mhm.
You are representing us.
Indeed.
We are students, yes. Faculty, students, we can all collect together and do as much as we can to advocate for ourselves. But then again, we have the most extreme limits to our own power. We are the ones that are going to be looked at as too extreme or as crazy or aggressive for whatever action we take to advocate for ourselves. You are the person that has been given that level of power where you can truly advocate. And I understand that it must be frustrating for yourself to have that limit as someone that holds an identity that is marginalized. But to me, it just seems, and excuse my phrasing of this, a little ridiculous to hear you say that it's your own limit is frustrating because, for instance, the whole aspect of the provost saying that he empathized and that's all, it's the only thing that we can be taking in. I feel like in your position, although you can't maybe come up with a piece of policy to combat that, I feel like in your position you can truly change the culture by, instead of accepting that empathy as the only response to the situation, challenge your fellow administrators. Say, sir, this is not the only piece of response that we as students will want. Can you come up with something more? Just constantly badger them for things, because it's just frustrating for all of us to see that the person that we are.
How do you know I haven't? You made an assumption.
I am making an assumption,
Right.
but you didn't really
Which-
explain it very much.
You shouldn't make assumptions about what's happening in Hubby Hall.
Right.
You should not. You should not make assumptions about the capacities that I bring to bear on my work. I think those are misnomers and dangerous ground.
Right.
I will say to you that I have lots of power and authority, but I do not supersede the president of the university, right? And if you're uncomfortable with that, then you need to kind of look at it in a different way. I am a vice provost. There is a provost who's the chief diversity officer of the university, and there is the president of the university, and there is a board of trustees, right? I fall in line with those. Now, I advocate every day for the value and success of students, right? But if the president makes a decision, that's a decision made. You may not like it, but that is real, yes.
So, Dr. Gates, I know that I've spoken with you about this a couple times, but as student body president, there have been times where I've had the opportunity to be in the room with President Daniels, and there are difficult conversations to be had. And sometimes when he makes those decisions, like yesterday when I asked him if he was aware of the situation, which he obviously was, and I said, there are students that feel disaffected by this. There are students that feel affected by the fact that we had white supremacist propaganda on campus last year and no comment about it, that we had neo-Nazi action in previous years and no comment from the administration, except to toe the line that they uphold the values of freedom of speech. But it seems to me that that freedom of speech in the eyes of this president only extends so far as the individuals that can, number one, have institutional power to use that as a vice of racism and bigotry. And so when a decision is made by the president, I as a student don't feel constrained sometimes by that because my job isn't dependent on the president of the board of trustees, and in those situations I find it valuable to speak truth to power. But what I find with President Daniels as he stymies dissent amongst his staff is not receptive of any sort of criticism, no matter how constructive, and even in the face of facts makes decisions that are politically in line with his career in politics. And so to kind of play into what Marone was saying, I don't want to believe that you've been tokenized in this position as a diversity and inclusion officer, as a gay black man, but with these limits to your power that have been superimposed on you by the administration that's hired you, how do you recommend that we, number one, as students, sort of try to drive the change, because all cultural change is difficult, right? And it's hard, and there are difficult conversations. And most importantly, to drive the change in politically otherwise infeasible situations, it takes speaking truth to power. It oftentimes takes protest. It takes really driving the message for them to understand it. So when I asked him, listen, students want to see action on this, or at least a statement, and his immediate reaction was to cut me off mid-sentence and say, you know what, Joe, I don't think I'll be doing that. And then list three reasons why. One, CVS is off campus. So now he's saying, if in the situation impacts a student, but it's off campus, I shouldn't have to touch it. I don't think that's true. Secondly, he said, quote, I think we're jumping to conclusions to assume that this was racially motivated. And so I sat up and said, I don't understand what else would have motivated this. And obviously now we understand, I guess, that it was, misinformation amongst the employee at CVS, which I don't think excuses it. But then third, he said, maybe I'm at fault because as governor, I instituted more difficult standards for people to be able to buy cold medicines and Sudafeds over the counter, and sort of laughed it off, and we moved on to the next topic. And he said, feel free to take this back to those student organizations. And I don't feel like, even though the answer is no, I won't do something, that he gave me anything constructive as student body president to bring back to these groups, to provide anything outside of your university. Part of you here doesn't give a shit about your lived experience. And I just want to know what you think about that.
That's a heavy setup. I will say that you've had more meetings and conversations with him about these issues than I have. We'll just leave it at that. Yeah. So I came to Purdue from the University of Virginia, where I was knee-deep involved in the alt-right issues and the KKK issues, and the deaths of Heather Heyer and 2 police officers at the hand of racism. I've seen hate and ugly, face to face, eye to eye. Right? I will say to you that in the midst of all of that, people died, and the entire university and city were traumatized. It took the president of the University of Virginia 5 emails to say the word racism, and 6 to say white supremacy. Institutions, we may not like it, are conservative beings. Generally, they are. Institutions also don't like to get into the middle of sticky wickets or difficult political spaces. They shy away from that. Hey, come on in. That's not just Purdue, that's all institutions. When I was at Harvard, same things happened. They wouldn't say anything. I'll come to you. The thing that I had to grapple with in coming here was that I knew that day would come. That something would happen on campus because people told me what they were upset about. And the university would not say anything. And people would expect me to say something, and I wouldn't be able to. That troubling, right? And it's our reality. What I will say is this. Among the things I did when I first came here was, people made me aware that we are a freedom of expression institution, point blank, period, that's it. And I asked, what counters freedom of expression? The response was, only violence or the threat or pretense of violence. Everything else is within the domain of freedom of expression. Freedom of expression here is both in spoken word and in kind of experiences. On its face, we do not tolerate racism or discrimination. But we also do not intercede when we see racist incidents happen. So a lot of things have come to my desk since I've been here. Swastikas on posters, negative things about African Americans, LGBT, issues around Islam. It's all happened. Jewish issues, right? And so far what I've been able to say is, I'm sorry. The thing that I wanted to do here was to balance freedom of expression with our core values. And so we actually have core values as an institution that most of us have not been aware of and have not been really lived fully. PSG has affirmed the core values, as has the Senate. Our core values as an institution are integrity, honor, respect, inclusion, innovation, and growth. Those are important core values. Respect is something that I'm hearing people are missing. Whether it's respect from people in the community or whether it's respect from the university itself and being silent. What can you do? You can hold us to our values. You can insist that if we speak these values and if we publish these values that we have to live them, and you can point out where we fall short on our values. I would say, just as a political matter, right? And I know that, you know, the desire is to just deal with the politics and change it. I'm telling you, it ain't gonna happen like that. Come to you, come to you. Part of what we have to do is figure out within the political context, what is the argument we construct to bring about the level of change and movement that we want, right? And so it may not be, President Daniels, we want you to do X. It may be, President Daniels, these things have happened that affect the broader, hear me out, the broader Purdue community. And it has a particularly deleterious impact on minoritized communities. We would like to be of help in managing or whatever this, ameliorating these issues. Here are things that we would like to partner with you in doing, right? So that's a difficult statement for me to make because I get that while you feel like you have been beset, right, and marginalized, I'm asking you to think in a way that makes the person that you feel has marginalized you, right, accept you in a different way. I know that's not easy. It may be that you say to him that among the things you need, I don't know what you need, but among the things you need is for the Chief Diversity Officer of the university and for my office to be as responsive to the psychosocial well-being of students as possible, including have a definitive role around developing the climate and culture of Purdue to be fully affirming and inclusive, right? If you look at the university's strategic plan, Purdue Moves, the word diversity appears nowhere in it. Nowhere, right? Not a syllable. that is how it's been for years. We are gradually moving to a different place, and we're having to take it on at small bites at a time, so as not to overwhelm, and so as to not have the entire diversity thing pulled from under us. Right? That's tough. Got a question? You got a question? And I'll introduce Mr. Casey. Hey.
You say that your power is limited and that your say in what the university puts out or does not put out is very limited. And that kind of disheartens us. I feel that if you can't say anything on behalf of us when you represent us, then, pardon my frankness, how can we reach out to you when we don't feel that you can help us? And you've said, frankly, like, you can't change this. I can't change their minds. How can we depend on you for that? And if I may also bring back the question, like, what constitutes as big enough to make them make a statement? Do we have to wait for something like El Paso to happen to us for them to say something? Or can we actually talk and move something? Because yes, change is slow, it's hard, and it's painful, but there's still actions that can be done. And we want to know how we can do that. We want change and we want to be included. I personally don't want to just make everyone think alike, like, oh, everyone needs to be Democratic or everyone needs to be Republican. No, that takes away from the beauty of the university. But we also do, like, as you said, the core values of respect and dignity. Those things aren't being represented in the university right now. And we need a voice for that. And if you can't do anything to help us, then how can we reach out to you?
Okay. That is, I appreciate your comment and your question. So she's asking first about my inability to impact the university's statements, whether we say something or not. I do not know at this juncture how to get around that. All I can say is that we'll continue to put our best ideas forward, right? And to press the need to be affirmative for students. Whether or not and when that will happen, I do not know. So that is a wholly unsatisfactory answer to you, but that is a wholly truthful answer from me, right? I would say that I'll go back to what I said before. You now have an opportunity, having met with me, to respond, right? Your response may be via the student body president or via yourselves as a collective voice that you do not feel that your views are fully represented and affirmed by the university's actions or inactions, and that you would like A, B, and C to occur. Perhaps what you want, I don't know, but think about it, is a committee that works with me and others at the university on these issues. There is no committee of students that engages with us on kind of crisis management or cultural issues. So maybe that's a recommendation. Maybe PSG and the Senate want to put together a document that provides guidance for what levels of incidences require a response from the university. That is within their right to do, right? And yours. I would say that the way to approach this, though, is collectively, soundly, dispassionately, no emotion, zero, and with reason, looking at the whole university, right, and what is best for the university. No threats, no, I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna do that, that's gonna fall flat, and you ain't gonna get nothing, period, right? Think constructively, make recommendations, ask us, and tie it all back to our values as an institution. Tie it back. Tie it back to Purdue Moves, too. So one of the things in Purdue Moves is transformative undergraduate education. What do we need to have a transformative undergraduate education at Purdue? Maybe it's a climate and culture and environment that affirms every student and that does not tolerate some things, right? Maybe, but ground it. Ground it, ground it, ground it, such that your voice can be heard, right? If your voice is tinged with emotion or with condemnation of anyone, it's going to fall flat in upheaval, right? So I'm trying to give you a little bit of what I know to guide you, but you'll have to pick it up. Hey.
I just wanted to say, first, thank you for being here. We understand that this is difficult. We are, I think, all of us grateful that you are here. But as you've said from the beginning, you already have a capacity to understand us. You already empathize with us. And this is probably something that you can't yourself respond to, but we're having this conversation with you. Thank you for giving us your time. But you're not really the person that we need to have this conversation with. We need to have these conversations with the opposing side or the people who don't see why this is such a big issue and why it does, yes, affect the whole campus. And I just want to go back to something you've kind of reiterated a couple times. You've said not one community, think of all, the whole campus. And I'm sure that you didn't mean this in a way to exclude the diversity of the community, but I feel that sometimes a lot of people forget that the Latinx community is diverse within itself.
Sure.
It has multitude of different races. It has indigenous people. It even has some Asian descent, obviously Spain, so white people as well. There is that whole part of the slave trade. So in of ourselves, we also have African and Black ancestors, or we are closer into that line. So it does affect a great wave. It shows a lot of ripple effect for a lot of people at university, and I also realize that we only make up a small part of it anyways, but I just wanted to point that out. And when you got here, you went over the incident at CVS, and then you very quickly, already from the beginning, from the get-go, said the university will not release a statement. And in my head, I thought that as well from the first time that I heard of this, and I heard of this when I was home for the weekend with my mom because someone had reposted it and she saw Jose's mother's post on Facebook. And I had already thought, I doubt that the university is going to say anything, but I still had that hope that we could do something. And then you tell us that we shouldn't opt out and then that's our responsibility and that we're more than just students, but by starting off by saying that this is an immovable wall, it kind of takes not the fight, because it's still there, but it pushes back all those things that we were imagining of doing. Kind of takes away the point of saying more just from that instance. So what, because you have given some examples of things we can do, but we still need the agreement of those people that won't even walk into this room.
So you're talking about the president.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the president's representative, right? What I would say is this. I did not want to come in here and provide you with a song and dance of false hope about what can happen. I believe in speaking truth and grappling with truth. The truth is that I hear you and I care and I know that the community is hurting. So does the provost. And I think so does the president. The president has determined that the university will not issue a statement. And that is the one thing I cannot change. So I'll come to you too. I didn't want to go through a whole litany of stuff when I know that this is the central issue that the group has, or at least that I've heard of so far. And have you believed that something could happen that I've been told absolutely will not? Now, I will go back, I'll come back to you. I will go back to the president, right? And I will assert, these are the concerns of the students, and here's my belief. We should do whatever I decide we should do from this conversation. And that, you know, this is my best recommendation. It will be his choice to accept it or not, right? President Daniels has a mind of his own. And we shall see what he says about that. With that said, okay, so I got 1, I got 2, then I got 3, I got 4. Okay.
Dr. Gates, you want to introduce?
Oh, yes. Everybody, this is the Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President of CVS, Mr. David Casey. Mr. Casey, these are students across the colleges and the classes at Purdue.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
And you all can address questions directly to him as well.
So it sounds like your hands are tied because of the particular position that you hold as far as being right underneath the provost and then right underneath the president. How possible would it be bureaucratically? I mean, I'm sure it would take a variety of steps and maybe a little bit of time and plenty of paperwork, but how possible would it be bureaucratically for the diversity officer, chief diversity officer in that position to be autonomous from the president so that that particular portion of the institution would be able to make statements, would be able to make institutional changes and things like that on behalf of the students without having to worry about that extra, without having to worry about that permission from the president, because you and the other diversity experts or whatever you have expertise on this issue. Mitch Daniels doesn't. So how possible would it be to institutionally sort of separate that so that it would also allow Mitch Daniels to say well, that's their statement, that's not our statement. And that might not be satisfactory, but at least there's some higher institutional order that's reacting to Nazi posters on campus, that's reacting to all of this sort of stuff.
Thank you. So, separate the structures. How difficult would it be? It would be almost impossible at this university or any other one. That would mean that I would have to be the chief diversity officer, one, and the chief diversity officer would have to report directly to the board of trustees. You know how boards are organized? Yeah. Politically, it would not happen. I appreciate the question. We can talk about it more offline. I can tell you why. But in every university that I know of, the person who runs diversity reports either to the president or the provost or both. In this case, however, what Purdue has done is have the role as a vice provost, which is solely on the academic side of the house, right? And solely related to the provost without a connection to the president. And so there is no way really to inform or engage the president without going over the head of the provost, right? So I'm a vice provost, not a vice president. The vice presidents report to the president. The vice provost report to the provost. At most progressive institutions where this is done well, the person in my role is both a vice president and a vice provost, with the administrative line and the academic line. So today, as it is, we think about the university writ large, right? So we have 57,000 people that make up Purdue. This role does not engage with anyone outside of the academic domain, which is half of the university, right? So, complex, but we can talk about it, okay? Yes,
Hi. Okay.
I'm coming back to you.
I just wanted to start with something I found, an article from the Huffington Post that you actually wrote about 5 steps to understanding racial bias, and I just thought a couple of the steps of it was actually really interesting. The first one.
You all should read my article, 5 Steps to Understanding Racial Bias.
Also, like, you can maybe implement these things to the trainings or something, and that's another conversation we can have.
Okay.
The first one is to avoid prepositions. 2, examine your preferences in light of your actions. 3, always ask, what if my perspectives or actions pertain to someone I love or to me? 4, seek advice from the people who are affected. And 5, which I think is something, again, I understand that your hands are tied and that you are fighting for us, but there is a lack of communication and transparency from you to the students to everybody in between and all the steps, and it's hard and bureaucracy. But I feel like number 5 is so important, and I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Examine honesty, your organization, policies, and practice to unmask propositions that may lead to discrimination, other detrimental effects, and have the courage to change them. Recognizing this shouldn't happen to any student at Purdue, and recognizing that this isn't just the Latinx issue, like we were talking about earlier, that it isn't just Puerto Rican students that go through this, and it's gotten national attention because of that. And I'm sorry, CVS, but it happened. This is something that's gonna fall back on Purdue because it does say Purdue students, and Purdue needs to make out a statement because Purdue does sell Purdue to people due to diversity and inclusion, and saying that, oh, we're so out there, we're out here saying that we want more black and brown people to come, we have a large international population, but if these populations can't even go to the CVS and go there calmly and just show them their passport or ID, fine, and have Purdue supporting them and be you know what, we acknowledge that this happened and we are here to support, and even making excuse my French, but a BS statement of being there are resources here on campus so that can help you get your ID, get this, go to CAPS, go talk about all these things and be able to get that, because there is a lack. There's a discussion of how Purdue supports students to succeed and graduate and retention, and that is under your position. How do we make sure that people stay and we retain them to stay at Purdue and graduate but we only do that, let's get real, we only do that for white cisgender heteronormative reproductive normative white men, we only do that for them, and we are not recognizing the experiences that students of color have to go through when yeah, we see the swastikas, and yeah, we see neo-Nazis walking around, and yeah, we see that we get called the N-word when we're passing by fraternities and sororities, and we get called a stick, and we get called all these bad words at us, but Purdue isn't recognizing that. But we still sell the sign of diversity and inclusion, and we have to acknowledge those experiences so you can support us, and maybe that transparency and having more communication can help with that. This isn't more of a question but more of a recommendation, as you were saying, having that transparency. I don't know if that means having a board of students to talk to and having and meet every month, and actively searching out and making sure that we are being heard, having people from the cultural centers come out as well so we can see that, because there's been incidences towards specifically Latinx organizations, the violation of the diversity tree happened a couple years ago. Also people here at the LCC, people stole our sign. How does that happen? How does no one see that? There are 4 houses here that could have seen that. These things, we need protection, and also recognizing the issues at CVS. Again, my beef is not with you, my beef is with Purdue. Recognizing, looking back at how there, from my understanding, there were people weren't going to the CVS's in Orlando because there was such a high population of Puerto Rican students, Puerto Ricans just in general, who would go to the CVS's, and people are boycotting CVS. So what do you think are the consequences of people seeing Purdue not doing anything about the situation and talking about it and being open about it? And I completely understand. I used to work for PRF. I used to work for the man. I used to talk to them, and I understand we are a red school. We are very much conservative, and honestly, it isn't just even President Daniels and like the board of trustees running this is more the donors and them telling them to like don't talk about this because we'll stop giving you money. I completely understand that, but like we also have to make a change and talk about it. And I understand you are within your limitation, but also again I believe that you do push, and I do believe because like you can't just sit there and be quiet, because I've tried to do that and it is hard too. It is hard, and that's why I have left from working for men. So like I completely understand, but like to like keep pushing or at least give us the support and transparency.
I'm just totally right now.
Like to give us transparency of like
Yeah.
what are you doing, and like to talk to us, and like to I feel like the lack of like transparency has gotten to this point where we're like we don't feel like we're being listened. This incident happened, no one's saying anything. So like this is what's happening.
Okay. So I would say a couple of things to that. You did something that was extremely effective. You read back to me my own words, and you asked me to place the current issues in the context of what I know and what I've written about. That is quite powerful, and it causes me to think afresh, right? I would say that if you look at the words of President Daniels, you can do the same thing with regard to this incident and a number of other incidences. I accept your recommendation that I should have a student advisory board. And so I'm going to ask Asanta to help me with that, because I don't know what to do. We'll talk about it and then we'll figure it out. We can do that. We can meet monthly. I am happy to receive your guidance and advice, and there are lots of projects that I'm working on that I need student input on. Lots of it affects underrepresented and other minoritized students and their success and trajectories. So I accept all of that. Okay, we'll continue the conversation.
She had a question, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
So I think this goes perfectly off what Lupe said in that air of transparency. What will your recommendation be? Because I know you said I'll take back and this I'll bring. What have you gathered from this meeting? What will you be saying to President Daniels? And I think that this is an opportunity. I get to sit on the civic literacy that might become a graduation requirement. This is a perfect, I think that or with maximizing student potential, what you literally just launched a few weeks ago, there are opportunities for the university to, as awful as it sounds, flip it in their favor, but that still is an acknowledgement as opposed to, so this happened. This is why civic literacy is important. This happened. This is why we should talk about maximizing the student potential of all of our members. I think that there are ways that he can still provide what we need in small increments, but I'm just very curious as to what you gathered and what you will be recommending to the president, because I can't really read you. So
I have gathered that beyond their passions, students have presented a reasoned argument for the university to be proactive in communicating our values, consistently, and particularly when incidents happen. That silence provides a resounding vacuum in voice and understanding of what's happening, and that is an area in which we can, it would be to our advantage to do better. I will say that I observed in this gathering a wonderful display of democracy, civility, and freedom of expression. This is very important because I'm framing the entirety of next semester and next year around the theme democracy, civility, and freedom of expression, right? That's a huge deal. And the president believes in freedom of expression and democracy, so it all ties together. And that I think we have an opportunity to engage students more deliberatively in exploring our democratic values as an institution. I recommend that I gotta think about this. I really gotta think about this. Gotta think about what works, what might work, right? It's threading the needle. It's very simple. I recommend one, that I have a student advisory board that meets. I recommend two, that we convene a committee to determine a communications committee to determine emergency communications. And that we function, in this case, that we have set criteria metrics that we use, right? And when something rises to a metric, we have a natural response that we make. So to systematize a response system, a response mechanism, and standards for engagement, I'm happy to recommend that. That would be transformative at Purdue, and it will be his choice, but he will get my recommendations. Are there any other recommendations that you think I should make, just in terms of the recommendations to the president?
I think, and this is just because we've heard about, in terms of talking about being civil and learning to communicate with one another, despite that, and talking about how we need to be diverse in all aspects, not just what we think diversity means. But with this incident and with incidents that happened before, with the Chick-fil-A, we can name on and on. I think what it comes down to for myself, and I'm speaking for myself, not as vice president, not as but the quote that James Baldwin says, "We can all love each other and agree until that impedes on my oppression, until that impedes on my humanity and my right to exist." And so I would recommend that whatever is put into place, or when you make something systematic or it just comes to a gauge, I think you lose that lack of humanity. And so by deciding to not respond to this or respond to the next event, he's taking away that aspect of humanity or that aspect of what makes Purdue great. Because I love my school, I love being here, but I think he needs to remember that incidents like this are an attack on humanity, and you can't just put that into a confined, this is how we're going to react with this, and then maybe we'll be sad. And so I just think that should be taken into consideration as you move forward.
I will, and I would ask you all as a takeaway from this, and as a learning opportunity, remember that if you want to be a change agent, and if you want to be successful in change, you must meet people who hold the lever of power at their point of receptivity, right? If you go at it like a brick wall with a collision, it ain't gonna work.
But at
Try.
some point you've got to break through the wall, right?
Yes.
There are points when the wall will break, right? But I will tell you, we are pretty fixed around here. Now, some of you have been at Purdue for 3 and 4 years. This is not new to you all. And we should not expect that what has been part of the climate and culture of the university for years is going to change with the advent of a vice provost for diversity who understands and cares. We're talking about changing a culture. The biggest and most difficult change to make in any system is culture, right? So what I'm trying to do is find that point where President Daniels can hear me and receive what I have to say on your behalf. And whatever that is going to have to be couched in something that he cares about directly. He cares about humanity. He cares about all of our concerns. But he also believes that institutions should not be the arbiters of social inequity and social justice. That's a deep belief. Yeah.
Hi again.
Hey.
You say we have to find something that he cares about, and my recommendation to that is he cares about himself, and so an attack on his students is an attack on him. If we feel under attack, and if we are not being shown the same respect as he would be shown in the street, or at his home, or at a CVS, then isn't that a point to make? Because we deserve as much respect as the neo-Nazi sitting next to us. We deserve the same respect as even the Trump supporter next to us, or the back when Hillary Clinton supporter. My also issue with what you're saying right now is that you say some things that I find contradictory. You say that's almost impossible, but then you go on to say keep fighting. You say that if you keep hitting at this wall, it's not going to work. you tear us down and you also bring us up. And I'm not saying that that's intentional or not. I'm just saying it's something I've noticed in your speech, and it's hard to gauge where you stand with us and where it begins with your passion and care for us and where it ends with like, this is my job. It's a line that I can't cross right now. Because yes, your hands are tied and you are limited, but we want to help you. Your hands they're not just tied to you, they're tied to us, and we want to be broken free as well.
Mhm. Well, that was beautifully said. So I don't want to dampen the passion and the ability of students to have a great impact on the institution. I think there are two segments that have great influence on an institution: students and faculty. Faculty are the relative keepers of climate and cultures at universities because they stay while the rest of us move through. I also have to contend with the political realities of the university and my role, right? So I'm trying to give you a bit of both, which is that threading of the needle that I keep talking about. On the one hand, you should, and I encourage you, to fully engage in your ability to be active and to advocate for change and to hold the institutional accountable, right? And I'm also saying that there are some mechanisms that will get the institution's ear and some that will not, right? Period, will not. The things that will not get the institution's ear positively, and this is true, are threats, right? Or, now understand this, any sense, this is going to be difficult, but any sense of victimization will not get the institution's ear.
Will not get the president's ear, which is different.
Okay.
I'm Elena Benedicto and I'm a faculty member here. And I think that what they are missing here, and I was confused as I entered the door and I heard you say that you respond to provost and the president. So because I thought that you were their advocate.
Who's advocate?
The students' advocate.
I am, so.
Let me finish.
But let me just correct you before you start, before you finish. I am the advocate for every person on this campus, whether they are brown or black or white, whether they are students, faculty, or staff, right? Whether we agree with them, whether they're neo-Nazis, or whether they are of a different ilk. Absolutely everybody.
I've been here 23 years, and I was here when 15 years ago, the president, the president at that time, while our current president was the governor of the state, declared that they would not at all take money from the gay community because their money givers would not approve of that. I was there and I got that message personally. 15 years later, that's not the case, right? We have a LGBTQ center, we are all with the flags and everything, with that guy that was the governor then, now as president. So people do change their minds. I don't know how exactly that happened. I also know, as a woman, as a person with an accent, that by being good, there's a wonderful quote from a professor in Harvard, a female professor in Harvard, that says, women never got anywhere by being good girls. Never, ever, anybody that was at the bottom of the ladder became higher up in the ladder by being good. It may be, whatever you're telling them may be strategic, maybe. I don't know that Mitch is gonna change his mind at all with anything. But I think that it is a trap to actually, or maybe we need people working on one side and on the other side, but I think it is a trap to fall into that's what he wants, because that's not what we want. And
Yeah.
we need, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work to make noise, but I never got where I am by being good and by playing along power. And he also pays my salary, not he, but the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees also decides whether I'm promoted or not promoted. I've spent here 23 years, and I have raised my voice, and I have fought those things, and I never am, and I may not. I've been accused of not having a big mouth and not being strategic, and maybe we need to be strategic, but I don't think we need to lose the passion. I don't think we need to lose the emotion. I think that we need to tell high and loud that this is not tolerable, that this is not how we expect to be treated, that this is not what we want. I think we need to say that loudly so that everybody hears that. He may not want to hear that. CVS definitely needs to hear that.
So I'm here.
Loudly, and then act on it. Because listening, it's good, but then we have to act on it. And I've been here long enough to realize that even the times that the university seems to be listening, then it just waits until everything dissipates. Because we get tired. You guys leave. And then a whole new cohort comes that doesn't remember. There is very little institutional memory. And we cannot let that happen. And we need to know that you are an agent of change, an active agent of change. That we need to know that you are there for everybody, including us.
I would, and I appreciate that. If you have an interest in where I sit, I would say read my writings. I'm the guy that wrote the article Pimping Diversity, right? I go at it. Call Harvard, call Virginia, call NYU, or call the University of Vermont, and they will tell you how engaged I am as a change agent in what I do. That said, I will work with, I did not join the Gates administration, right? Mitch Daniels did not join the Gates administration. I joined the Daniels administration, right? And I will work, you may not like it, and that's okay, right? We won't be happy coming out of this meeting, and that's okay too. What you all need to understand is that I work for Mitch Daniels on your behalf and on behalf of everybody else, right? But I work for Mitch Daniels, and Mitch Daniels is the president of this university. I am not the president, right? Now, when you all in leadership positions and you don't like what your boss says, right? You can decide either to be there and work for change or to not, right? I work for Mitch Daniels, period.
But Mitch Daniels works for the university.
Mitch Daniels works for the university, and
we work for the university.
So then the faculty should take this on, right? If you believe that there is an issue with that, take it on, right? But do not, it is unreasonable to think, knowing the climate and the culture and the politics that we have, that someone is going to swoop in and become the savior for this institution and to make everybody feel good. I will say to you, I'm coming to you too. Just like we have concerns that we have, I've got a whole other constituency. I've got conservative students, right? Christian and other conservatives. I got to care about them too, right? So they feel isolated, we feel isolated, they feel insecure, we feel insecure. The university is not dealing with any one of them affirmatively in their minds, right? We have to be a community where everybody is able to dwell, right? We are not an institution just for conservatives or liberals or black or white. We're for everybody, right? And that does mean there's going to be tense from time to time. Yes, and then I'll come here, I'll come there. Yes, and I'll come there. Yes.
Okay. So, like you said, you're not going to stoop down to your savior, but I think that is our issue. I don't think that we're asking someone to come and save us. I think that we have a broad group of students who have been working for change for years since they've been here, and we have organizations that have been working for change. And like you said, that wall is gonna be hard to bring down. So in my eyes, the vice provost of diversity is the battery ring. And so either you're gonna help us push it through or it's gonna break.
Okay. So let's figure out how I can help. It is not at all that I don't want to, and that I'm not willing to, but I am a strategic person, right? I'm a strategic diversity specialist, which means I don't do for diversity for diversity's sake, and I don't do it because it's the right thing to do. I do it to drive value. And business is driving economics, and higher education is driving excellence, right?
But that says so much right there. That says so much that you're not doing it for diversity's sake. You're not doing it because it's the right thing.
No, wait a minute.
You're doing it
Hold
because
on.
it's value.
Hold on, my friend. I think you may not understand what diversity is, right? I think that's a fundamental thing. You don't know what diversity is.
Diversity is
What?
more than one thing. It's more than one type of thing.
But what I'm hearing is that you all think diversity is about y'all.
No.
That's what I'm hearing,
What
right?
we're saying is on this campus, diversity means a plethora of different things. These are the smallest
On
groups.
this campus, diversity means excellence expressing itself through the intersection of perspectives and lived experiences, and I know that because I defined it. And that's how we roll at Purdue.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. That
You don't have to like it.
your students that you said you're representing and that you're trying to hear out, we don't feel like that is the purpose of our diversity. We don't believe
Your
in the
diversity is not to be
thought.
excellent. Your diversity is to be marginalized. Your diversity is solely that you're black, right?
Oh.
So you want me to say what the institution has said, this one and all other ones, that I look at you and I see you as a diminished human being. I see your possibility as diminished. I see you as at risk, and I see you only through the prism of your race and your gender. That's what most people believe diversity is. That's how we roll. I'm saying clearly, diversity is excellence, right? When I see you, I see your excellence. I see your potential. I see your possibilities. What you're saying to me is that you want me to see black.
What I want you to see, because this sounds like, I learned about this a lot. This sounds like multicultural versus the assimilation model. And no, I do want you to see black. I don't, that's never been an issue. But
Okay.
I don't want you in your head to automatically say black is a diminished individual. That statement right there, it doesn't work.
Wait a minute. So I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole with this, right? I respect your perspective. I hope you will respect mine. We define diversity the way we do. That's how we roll, and that's how we're going to roll, right? I value your blackness, and I get clearly that there are issues here. If you want me to be the person who's going to ramrod the administration, I am not that guy, right? You simply may not be happy. And this may not be the institution for you, if you're not, right? Listen.
It may not.
It may not, and that's your
So I should
prerogative.
be-
Look,
It might not be for me.
let me tell you something. You're going down a rabbit hole. I'm saying to you, we believe everybody's diverse. If you don't believe that, I'm sorry. But I do, right? I believe that people should be treated respectfully, right? You, me, and everybody else. We are an institution that is 150 years old. You want me to make a change that I cannot make. And if that is enough to say the institution doesn't care, I can't fix that for you. Right?
Well, now I feel like if you feel like that you cannot fix that issue, that you're just simply submitting to it. You're co-signing at this point.
You want to argue. I want to have a conversation.
I
If
don't
you want to
want-
have a conversation, we can have a conversation. Okay? I am saying that we will do the very best we can on these issues, but we are not going to change Mitch Daniels.
But we can't agree on what the issues are.
What are the issues?
Well, we have different views of diversity. Diversity is
Okay.
about or diversity.
We'll continue this and it'll go round and round. We can have a conversation on what is diversity at Purdue and elsewhere. Yes.
So you said that you represent every student at Purdue. How can you efficiently and effectively represent marginalized groups on campus while also representing white supremacists and people in general who are already overrepresented on this campus? Like you were saying before that like white Christians or conservatives feel isolated, but this is a conservative campus, so I'm sure you understand that their views are always, you know, dissipated throughout campus with a megaphone. And are you doing the work? Do you think it's important to do the work to?
Are you all
represent-
going into the world of work? Are you all going into corporate America at all? Because you need to get this lesson real quick. When you go into corporate America, diversity is going to be about everybody. Diversity is going to be about pulling the value out of everybody. That's why we do it, right? You all say you believe in inclusion. Yes? No? But what I've heard is that you want me to exclude some people. And you're asking me if I can be effective in valuing one group and another group that are diametrically opposed. Yes. That's the world of diversity.
I think what I'm trying to say is they're already so included and integrated in the campus. We are not. So
But they don't feel that. They don't feel that.
If they are always going to victimize themselves and make it seem like they have it just as bad as we do, and that's not true, is it fair for you to buy into that?
I'm not buying into anything. What I'm saying is, I'll come to you. I believe in equity.
Uh-huh.
Equity-mindedness is that we treat people differently to provide them what they need to succeed.
Uh-huh.
That is individually based, right? Not group-based. I'm saying that just like minority students and liberal students, not necessarily the same, feel marginalized, Christian conservatives feel marginalized too. Now I will tell you, I am not Christian, I am not conservative, I am not woman, I am not Hispanic, I am not white. But I will stand for all of those every day of the week.
But objectively speaking, we are marginalized. We are not integrated. And historically, on Purdue's campus, we have never been accepted the way white conservative Christian students have been accepted. So even if they quote unquote feel like they're being oppressed or they feel othered, I'm sure you know better.
Yeah.
So why would you think that we're trying to say that we should exclude them when we know we are actually the ones being excluded and they are not?
So I need you all to hear me.
Okay.
I really need you to hear
trying.
me. Hear me. I'm trying to get us to a point of engagement where we can make a difference, right? At Purdue, for you, within the climate and context of the university, and what I know I have to do, right? If conservatives and white students feel that this whole thing of diversity is just about a group, which is what it's been for years, right, in their minds, there's all kinds of resistance that happens, all kinds. And you get the climate and the context that you have today, right? The question becomes strategically, do we want to fight the battles? And we're gonna fight these battles, but do we wanna fight in the same way that has been fought for years and that we know is not going to work? Or do we wanna find a different route? I will tell you this, and you may not like this either. And don't tell Mitch. But much of my work, much of it, all of my career now, is about Black and brown students. But you will not hear me speak overly much about Black and brown students, because I cannot get done what I need to get done for Black and brown students under that rubric. Do you understand that? That I have to speak about all students. You want me to speak about Black and brown and the realities. And I can do that quite effectively. But doors close, okay? If I speak about all students and work for the support of Black and brown students, doors open. That's a context, right? That's a strategy. That's not weaking out. That is my strategic position to get done for Black and brown students what I need to get done.
I really have something to say about that. As a current senior right now, we talk a lot about right now we've been talking a lot about the definition of diversity and inclusion and institution, which are the top words I've heard throughout this past hour. And the thing is, as a student who initially signed up for Purdue, as soon as I checked off Black in that box, I began getting those emails about, oh, all this great things about diversity and inclusion at Purdue. So even though that you're saying that encompasses everyone, like, it's very obvious to see that that's who it's geared at. It's geared at the Black and brown students at Purdue. Because none of my other white peers in high school who applied to here got those emails, got anything. That wasn't even a concern for them. So that was a huge concern for me as well. So to me, and after you saying, oh, this was a strategy, to me that feels like a trap. Because I came to the school expecting, like, okay, this is a great school that's doing their best to include me and my experiences. However, when I come here, I don't get that, and I see a lot of students being discriminated against. Like you said, I've been here for my fourth year now, and this is not the first time I've seen something like this that happened. And that's extremely disheartening to me, because it's like I worked so hard to come to the school and want to be involved and accepted, but I don't get that. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. And the way it's been communicated has been extremely dismissive. It's really hard for me, as she was just saying, to accept that these white conservative students are feeling discriminated against, because when we don't talk about it, they're still, when we're not talking about our issues, they're still the ones benefiting. And when we ignore the neo-Nazi propaganda, the white supremacist posters around campus, they're still the one benefiting because no one is being held accountable for it. And at this point, it's really, really disheartening, because if you as the vice provost of diversity and inclusion can't provide us with that protection, it's like, who can we go to for that? And the second part I want to talk about, something I just don't buy, is Mitch Daniels saying this did not happen at Purdue University since it was at CVS. Like, I don't buy that. This weekend, including Monday, I attended the Old Masters program where we brought back Purdue alums. These are people who went to Purdue, they graduated, and their careers now have nothing to do with that. But Purdue takes so much pride of saying, oh, these are Purdue alums, like, we provided this with them. So that pride that we have for them, like, going out and doing great things, because they were a Boilermaker, I feel like we should have the same energy for the people who are discriminated here, who have been discriminated against, and be like, this is a Boilermaker, so we can't stand with this discrimination. So that's one thing I just really can't buy. If we can celebrate the achievements of a Boilermaker, why can't we, like, talk about the issues that they face here, so that way when they graduate they can say, okay, I'm a Boilermaker, Purdue really took care of my needs, they really stepped up when I was discriminated against, and I felt that sort of community. Because right now, these are, as Lupe also mentioned, or someone else mentioned, the people that need to hear this aren't here. And I was really excited to have you in here and talk to us. But just after listening to everything, it's really hard for me to feel that sort of pride and think, oh, what's next? Like, how can we get justice and avoid situations like this from happening again?
So, I hear you, and I feel you. I will say that you all would be much happier with the conversation if we were actually able to have the conversation that you want to have and that I want to have. And so I hope you will trust that I want to have the conversation and that I absolutely get what's happening, what you're saying, and what you feel, right? I get it. And I'm not saying any of you is wrong. I haven't heard anything today that I consider to be wrong or out of line or inconsistent with truth, right? I get that. I have to find a way to thread the needle to get people to behave differently. And that is not very easy, but that's my job. Yeah.
I just wanted to, we have from CVS here, and
Yes.
you said that if you're incorporated, so I am incorporated, I am an incorporated American. And when this happened, what did CVS do, right? we're now implementing these trainings. And so I think that corporate America does a great job of when there's someone or a community that's been marginalized acting for that community, just like CVS has done. I would love for if you speak more on that, but just to your point that, do you know what diversity is like within corporate? You addressed concerns where they need to be addressed. With KPMG, there was an incident that happened, and then they addressed it as head on. And so I just feel like hearing about that from the perspective that Dr. Gates was talking about, how do you feel, what are you taking in, and what has CVS done to, in that corporate sense, to address this issue?
Yeah, thank you, by the way. So, is Moises Martinez here? There you are. Hey, it's good to meet you in person. So we issued, first of all, we issued an apology publicly, right? Which Jose's mom asked us to do, and we felt we should do anyway. I wanted to come here today to put a face on that public apology, because the public apology is kind of corporate speak. There was no name on it. I'm here as David Casey to personally apologize for what happened to Jose at CVS. It shouldn't have happened. We acknowledged that, we communicated that. Not to make an excuse for our employees, but the ignorance or lack of knowledge across the country around understanding that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens is absolutely abysmal. So we are taking steps to make sure that does not happen at CVS again. And then I also want to figure out how we can take steps to make sure that, given our position as a Fortune 8 company, how can we make sure we educate people on a broader scale? We have 300,000 employees. We conduct 6 million transactions daily. So we have a lot of opportunity to get in front of a lot of people and communicate with a lot of people. And we want to leverage that platform to do that. You will never hear any of us say that what happened at CVS should have happened. It should not have happened. I described what happened in that incident to my boss as the perfect storm of everything that could have gone wrong in a transaction. All of it would have been avoided if Jose's driver's license would have been recognized as a U.S. driver's license and a valid form of ID in the first place. I think it got exacerbated, and I won't repeat the whole scenario because I'm sure you all know it probably better than I do at this point, but it got exacerbated by the fact that Jose did have his passport. The cashier understood that passports are also an alternative form of ID, so asked to see that passport, asked to see a portion of the passport beyond the part that just has the ID in it, asked to see the visa portion of the passport. And if I was in Jose's shoes, I would have interpreted that as, you're challenging my status to be here, my right to be here. That's based on what I know, because I don't know the cashier personally. I'm going to visit that store for the first time after I leave here. But based on what I've read from the statements and based on what I do know, I don't believe she had any malcontent. I don't think she was trying to act like an ICE agent. Quite frankly, because of that store's proximity to campus, that store gets visited by excise officers quite a bit because they want to make sure we are not selling stuff to students that we shouldn't be selling, alcohol, whatever it may be. This particular purchase was an age-restricted purchase because of the ingredients in the cold medicine. So it wasn't even our choice to ask Jose for his ID. By regulation, we have to ask everybody for their ID when they're purchasing that med. So it should not have happened. There was a delay in getting back to Jose's mom, who's in Puerto Rico. She was frustrated by that, and I think that delay in getting back to her, which was our fault, there was a miscommunication between our customer service department and the store here. The store thought the issue that happened with Jose was resolved, and they communicated that back to the store manager, so she didn't do anything with it. And all that time, Jose's mom is in Puerto Rico, like, how come nobody's talking to me? We also had been in communication with someone, I don't know who that person is, but they identified themselves as Jose's relative, who we have now come to learn is not Jose's relative. So we again thought we were communicating with this family when we weren't, but we didn't find that out till fairly recently. So there are just so many things about this transaction that could have gone wrong, and they all did. What I will commit to you is that, again, out of 6 million transactions a day, that's a lot of opportunities for something to not go right in a transaction. It's also a lot of opportunities for things to go right. And I think more times than not they do. And given my job as chief diversity officer for the whole company, if this was a prevalent issue, part of the narrative out there was CVS is discriminatory. CVS is racist. So the actions of one person who made this mistake are now attributed to the entire company. And I can tell you with 6 million transactions a day, if this was happening consistently and prevalently across our company, it would have been a much bigger story before last weekend. So I don't believe it's happening across the company. And there, to your question about training and what we can do to mitigate it, there are things we can do to mitigate it. When you're dealing with 300,000 people, understanding and controlling their behavior and everything they do is nearly impossible. It's virtually impossible. What I can do is we can train, we can educate. The company already had policies on the books that says Puerto Rican IDs are acceptable, right? The company has already has done training to make sure our cashiers understand that. Why in this one transaction it didn't get processed the way it should have? You know, we may never know. Do I believe that cashier was racist? Do I believe that cashier was targeting Jose? I don't believe that. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't believe that. Nothing has given me any reason to believe that. From what I understand, this cashier was uber nervous because of the excise officers who have been in the store. So she was really trying to do the right thing by making sure she wasn't selling the product illegally. The way she did it, we can debate and litigate all day long. But I really do believe she had positive intent that just really went about it the wrong way based on a lack of education and knowledge. So since then, we have rolled out, we have reiterated our policy to all 10,000 stores across the country. We already have training in place. We're going to keep that training in place. We're going to keep it in front of people. But I would ask you, one of our challenges is, you know, out of our 300,000 employees, about 180,000 are in retail. They're part-timers. And we have turnover. So we can roll out training all day long, but we constantly have new people coming in. So it's a matter of constantly retraining people and making sure we're educating people. And I will also say not to make this an excuse by any stretch, because we want every single one of those 6 million transactions to go well. So I'm not going to use this as an excuse. But our business is a highly regulated business. You know, if one of our employees sells the wrong thing to someone, we had an employee several years ago who sold too much pseudoephedrine to one customer, and we had to pay a $75 million fine to the DEA. So they're constantly swirling in their heads, am I processing this transaction? People may think it's fairly easy to work in a CVS, it's a store, what's the big deal? But every single thing that crosses our cash register is governed by regulation. So our cashiers are constantly thinking, are we selling the right thing to the right people in the right way? So it's for that reason I believe this cashier's intent was not nefarious by any stretch. That's not the narrative that played out, and I understand. I understand the frustration. I understand that because of the environment we live in right now. You know, as Dr. Gates was talking about, you know, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've been a chief diversity officer for 18 years in corporate America. People ask me, is this the most divisive time I've ever seen in our country? And I don't know if it's the most divisive, I don't know if it's the most divisive or not. I'll stand back because I tend to spray when I say. I don't know if it's the most divisive or not. I would say the Civil War was probably pretty divisive. I would say the Civil Rights Movement was probably pretty divisive. So I don't know if it's the most divisive, but it certainly feels like it because we all have access to it, you know, very quickly and probably overabundantly. But this feels like a different time than I've ever experienced in my 51 years of life. So I don't want to minimize the one incident that happened with Jose because that one incident matters. It's an experience that Jose will probably never forget. Quite frankly, it's one I'll never forget now. So I don't want to minimize it by any stretch. But I also want to, I understand where that frustration is coming from because when you have lots of individual situations like that, they add up, right? So I understand that what happened at that CVS may have been a tipping point or a catalyst for frustrations that you all are feeling that are beyond CVS. I get that, you know? And like Dr. Gates was saying, I have a personal connection to it. You know, I drive a fairly nice car. I work hard for it. I've earned it. I'm scared to death driving that car. I should probably drive an old beat up car because I'm worried somebody's going to stop me based on how I look and assume that I shouldn't be in that car. I live in a nice neighborhood. I go out of my way to make sure my neighbors know I'm friendly and I'm not that kind of black guy, right?
You too.
And it eats away at me, you know. I know who I am. I'm proud of who I am, but it's all those micro aggressions, all those one-offs that add up over time and make you extremely frustrated. I understand that, but I hope you don't subscribe to the narrative that what happened in that situation, in that transaction, means that CVS is racist. I work there. I know people who work there. I'm not racist. The company's not racist. Out of 300,000 people, do we have some knuckleheads who might work for us? Maybe. You know, with 300,000 employees, we are a microcosm of what we have in the United States. We certainly try to screen for that when we hire people, but I would ask you, how many of you have perfectly screened somebody you dated? There's a reason you don't marry everybody you date, right? So anyway, I'll stop talking and I don't want to ramble, but you know, I came here today to put a face on the public apology. We have reached out to Ricky Martin. I don't think we've heard back from him yet, but you know, we do want Ricky to understand where we're coming from. You know, we don't mean any disrespect to the Puerto Rican community, the Latinx community, or any other community, right? So I didn't want you all just to read a statement online and say they've apologized. Plus, it was easy for me to get here because I live in Indianapolis now. And I'll stop with this. I have a personal penchant for Purdue as well. I took classes here. I graduated from Indiana Wesleyan, talking about conservative schools. But I did take classes here. My wife graduated from here with her master's, and my daughter got her bachelor's and her master's from Purdue. And so when I was on campus 28 years ago, I don't think we had this many students of color at all. So I applaud you for coming together and using your voice. And it's nice to see, I know we have a ways to go, but it's nice to see that there is more diversity here than there was when I was here 28 years ago. So I am down the road. Dr. Gates and I, we've known each other for a while. I told him I would be more than happy to come back beyond just this one occasion. Hopefully the next time I come back, it'll be under much better circumstances and not over an issue like this. But I would love to be a part of whatever dialogue I can be a part of, because I'm not a corporate suit. CVS is not some faceless entity. We have 300,000 individual people who work there, right? We have 25 stores in Puerto Rico, you know, so as a company, it's not like we don't understand what Puerto Rico is and who Puerto Ricans are, right? So I don't want you all to think that what happened in that one transaction is a reflection of who we are as an organization. And we have to earn that. I can't just stand here and tell you to trust us, that we're not going to have another incident like that. We may. With 6 million transactions a day, we probably will. I can't promise you that will never happen again. I will tell you that we will put the right protocols in place to mitigate it happening again. And if it does happen, we will act on it. I had a question here, and then I see you back there.
Okay, so just going back to Dr. Yates' beautiful article about 5 steps to understanding racial bias. Looking back at your policies and things like that, that's really good, and I understand that you were taking action. But at the same time, the person who confronted Jose wasn't just a cashier; it was also a shift manager, someone who's supposed to be in charge, and someone who's supposed to take that initiative. So, in a sense, I understand. This is a conversation that, you should be having with us because we are pissed off and we are here in solidarity with what happened and understanding, because it isn't just Jose, it isn't just Puerto Rican students,
Sure.
It is other international students. I understand it's working at a CVS and a Walgreens. My brother is autistic, he gets controlled substances on Vyvanse, and my mom had to go with her ID and show them, and then they have to check and they have to look at her and do all these things. So I completely understand. But 1, it was just cough medicine, and 2, they should not have to do that, because that was not the only incident where they asked people for their passports and for their visas. They do that for international students, and that should be a training for a lot of CVSs and educating people for understanding okay, you have one identification, why do you keep asking for more identification? You should not be having to be okay, give me your ID, give me your passport, give me your visa, when your visa is already in your passport most of of the time anyway.
Right. You
So
don't
it is
even
a
need.
regulation. And like looking back, like recognizing your own organizations, like policies that, like honestly looking at them and like calling it out, because like I understand how you're saying like not everyone at the CVS is racist. But usually white people say when they're talking about themselves and their family, like we have a black friend, we're not racist. Like no, like you need to like call it out and recognize like what's going on. And I understand this is a lot to put just on you, but like also as like people of color, like we're upset and it isn't just happening to Jose, and it isn't just, and it's easy to just talk about him, especially because he's a Puerto Rican like student and a US citizen, but we also have to think about like our international like communities and also think about like the undocumented communities, but which I want to reiterate isn't just Latinx, but also is Black and Asian and like every like color of the rainbow, like everything. And we need to like recognize that, and there has to be like a further movement for CVS to like recognize that. And also like we're just talking here with you because like you're here, but at the same time this is a conversation you should really be having with Jose, because I feel like he would probably like appreciate you talking to him.
So on that point, I will tell you, I have offered to speak directly to, I sent Jose's mother an email, a personal email, not our corporate communications team didn't write it, I wrote it. I sent Jose's mother an email, and I said, I would love to speak with you in person if you would like, because at that point she had already talked to a whole lot of people at CVS. But I offered, I said, if you would like to speak with me, I would like to talk with you, and if you would give me permission to speak to your son, I would like to talk to him. So I know that our area leader here has talked to Jose directly, and then he kind of gave us some feedback that, hey, I have a lot of studying to do as well. So he kind of said, hey, enough calls from people from CVS, so I'm leaving the ball in his court, that if he would like to talk to me, I would love to talk to him. We'll go to Triple X, I'll buy him a burger, whatever it takes. But I'm not going to impose myself upon him. If he would like to talk, I have already expressed that I'm very willing to have that conversation. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy to have this conversation about Jose. Again, that's the incident that I'm here to talk about. I understand this happens much more broadly. Well, that is my job, and that's what I do every day. So I am here to talk about that particular incident, but believe me, I do know that it happens more broadly. My team looks at those 6 million transactions I talked about. My team looks at data across all those transactions to make sure that we're not engaging in discriminatory behaviors. And if we are, we correct it. Right? We are looking at our policy now to make sure that every U.S. territory is explicitly named in the policy. In some of our policies, it just said U.S. territories. Not everybody knows what all U.S. territories are. So instead of saying all U.S. territories, we're going to list them out by name so that people can see in the policy what those U.S. territories are. So there are things, you're right, there are things systemically that we can do and will do to get better. We will make mistakes. One of my philosophies is first time mistakes are errors, repeated mistakes are intentions. So our goal is to make sure we don't make repeated mistakes. I saw your question back here.
Actually, this question is more for Dr. Gates, if I may.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I also work as a telephone caller. I raise funds for the Purdue University, so this is actually an anger question, not to you, but to Mitch, and hopefully something you can take to him. If CVS can stand here and say that we are making a statement saying that this is not okay, and they're not even making it political, they're not saying si se puede or melt ice, they're saying this was not okay. People need to be treated with dignity and with respect, and they are able to say that U.S. territories do matter to the U.S. Why can't Purdue do that? Why can't Purdue do the same thing as CVS, who is a company, who is not going to just stand here and back some political, unless that's what CVS wants to do. CVS said once it's an accident, twice it's a pattern. Here at Purdue, it's been more than twice. And I'm sorry, again, I understand as a telemarketer not as a telemarketer, as someone, a student caller that works for the university, and people are saying like, why are you asking me for more money when I pay you so much tuition? I'm not saying this to you directly, I'm saying this to please take it to President Daniel and the admin. If CVS can take this, not take a political stance, but just say humans are humans, they need to be respected, why can't Purdue do that?
I will absolutely take that back. Yeah. And I agree.
Can we get this gentleman, he's been.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Patiently. First of all, again, thank you, Mr.
David.
Casey.
Mr. Casey was my father.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David Casey. To explain the reasoning why a corporation such as yourself would issue that statement, first of all.
Yeah.
And then a follow-on question would be, what engagement can CVS help push the narrative to our institution to say, hey, we are partners within the community. West Lafayette community and Purdue have a partnership as a town and as a university. And so, as members of the community, as members of the university community, what can the corporation say? Hey, Mr. President Daniels, this is something that is on the right side of history to do.
Yeah.
And what corporate pressure could you exert on it, considering that there are some donations that happen between or contributions from CVS to the university.
I'm a visitor on these grounds, so that's a conversation I'll have to have with Dr. Gates. I mean, that's how you navigate things here at Purdue University. I control how we navigate things at CVS Health. So, I'll have to work with Dr. Gates, and obviously I think our company, somebody I'm sure has a relationship with President Daniels. So, we'll have more conversations about that. Why we chose to make the public apologies, because we should have made the public apology. And again, the reason why I'm here today is I don't think it's enough that we just issue the public apology on our social media pages. You all are real people. You have to deal with this stuff daily. I wanted to come here and look you eye to eye, and quite frankly, hear from you. I didn't want to stand up here and make a presentation. I want to hear from you on how we can be better, right? Because if we don't hear that from you, we're not going to get better. We're not perfect. This will not be the last incident CVS Health will have. It's not the first, right? But when you think out of the context, out of 6 million, we certainly try to minimize that. But each one matters, right? Jose doesn't care about the other 5 million and change transactions that we conduct. He cares about his, right? So it's our one. We have 4 goals in our diversity strategy at CVS. One is to have a workforce that looks like the people we serve, and that's a huge aspiration. It's not easy to get to, but we're working on it. The second is to make sure we have a culture of inclusion and belonging, where everybody can feel like they have a voice, they have a seat at the table, and they can be fully productive regardless of their background. The third is to make sure that everybody has equitable growth and development opportunities in the organization regardless of their background. Now, the fourth is why I'm here today. The fourth is to make sure we're meeting and exceeding the needs of our customers. But it's also to make sure that we're a good steward in the communities in which we do business. After Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore, we had 2 stores that got burned down in the neighborhood, and that was an inflection point for us as a company to understand how we show up. Because the feedback I got from the communities, from a couple of the community activists, was, yes, CVS was in our community. Yes, we were getting our prescriptions from your CVS. Most of my family gets their prescriptions from CVS. We felt like CVS was in the community, but we didn't feel like you were a part of the community. So that's why your store got burned down. So that was a huge lesson for us, to not just build a store in the community. We have to be a part of the fabric of that community. And if I can't get in my car for 45 minutes and drive up here and meet with you all, then we're not living up to that aspiration. So I'm not sure who is next.
Right here.
So I just wanted to clarify, not because I thought you had any intention behind what you said, it was just probably something that fell through the cracks, but Jose does care about the other transactions. The reason why he said he was comfortable about speaking about it was because he didn't want it to happen to someone else.
Right.
And as a Puerto Rican, he said that he had experienced things like that before. It wasn't anything new. His
Right.
mom was the one who spoke
That's why he
out.
had his passport.
So I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
And also something that we seem to be glazing over and that Lupe actually mentioned was the fear for international students as well. And then also people who can't provide an ID. But you said that they are regulated through the FDA. So what do they do in situations where international students have to present themselves in a CVS or I guess in any drugstore? Is that something that CVS has any control over, especially when it's something that's located on campus where these students, this population that is massively represented in Purdue, since it is such a global institution, where do they go?
So it is, we just had this conversation. So we can't break the law.
Yeah, obviously.
You know, so, and there are different laws. Some are state laws, some are federal laws. We can't break the law. But what we can do is we can recommend alternatives to people who may not be able to purchase something if they don't have the appropriate ID. So, and that is part of our ongoing, I think somebody asked about, I think it was you that asked about the training and how do we deal with this more systemically. Part of the training that we're looking to upgrade and evolve is to make sure that people do understand how do you adequately give people alternatives if they can't purchase something that requires an ID. So, you know, in this case, you know, there may have been alternatives that we could have offered to that cold medicine that had dextromethorphan in it. So pseudoephedrine and dextromethorphan are two cold medicine ingredients that are regulated, and we have to have their age restricted, right? So there are other cold medicines. There's probably a combination of other cold medicines that we can recommend to a customer who's undocumented or doesn't have an ID. So we want to make sure that our pharmacists and our cashiers, our front store employees are trained on how to make alternate recommendations. I don't think that happens a lot, but to the extent it does happen, we want to make sure that everybody understands if they can't buy that, please make sure you help them understand what they can buy.
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Okay. Dr. Gates, so you said that you were going to recommend criteria and metrics so that if
That we develop.
an event happens and it meets a certain criteria, a certain response is given. Who would you also recommend, like, who would determine those criteria and what events would follow afterwards?
Yeah, we have a strategic communications office, and they have a whole protocol, so they would be the initiators, right? These things would come to the provost, to me, to the strategic communications folks, to the chief of police, etc. There is a committee that meets periodically, kind of a risk management committee. You could also refer to that. I would say probably, and I could use your guidance, your help. And so when we do the student committee, to advise me and deal with this and put the plan together ourselves. I don't know what the threshold should be for a public comment from the university, right? So we're gonna have two issues. We're gonna have what we see as the need and at the stages. Then I'm gonna have to work with President Daniels to see where his threshold is. We're gonna have to find some threshold probably in between. So perhaps he will understand and come in line. We may have to move up a little bit and we find that spot. I am committed, as I just said to others, to developing this committee. I'm gonna ask Juan, if you're interested in being on I'll just call it for now, a minority student advising committee to the Vice Provost for Diversity. And you're here, let Juan know, and if you just send it over to my office, we'll convene a meeting this semester. And we can meet, we can decide 2 or 3 times next semester and take it from there. We can decide what we want our working outcome to be. One of those outcomes might be a collaborative document that outlines when communication should happen from a diversity perspective.
Do you think, like, having the student advisory board would be very impactful? Because you did also say what Mitch McDaniel says goes, and really you would only be.
Students' voices are really,
of course.
really important.
But I'm saying, do you think there would be a way for either us to, and like our ideas that you are presenting, would they effectively change his consciousness? Would any real change come out of that? Or are you just, continuing to?
No, this is not kind of make-believe and pushing it around or anything like that. I think if we don't have a plan, we don't get to make change. I think with a plan, we can do that. There are university level communications are approved by the president solely, right? So we've got that. There are internal communications that we can do. So what should come out of the provost office? Right now, we don't know, for instance, who should respond to what, right? Right now, the president responds to everything. Well, there are levels, right? The president can respond to some things, the provost can respond, I can respond, the vice president for ethics and compliance can respond. we have not worked out a system of response, and so it's all at the presidential level. We probably need to step it down, right? And in that case, if it's not coming from the president, we can probably get a lot more done. So those kinds of things. Yeah. All right, I want to say this. Thank you all for coming. I feel beaten up, but I know you didn't really intend it that way, but I'm like, oh my God.
I'm sweating. It's a lot of here.
I am committed to you, and I've heard you on all of the issues. I do not take any of what we've said either with offense or dismissively. So I really do hear you. Let's figure out next steps. I would say that we, as a university, and I'm sure that President Daniels agrees, value and encourage your engagement, including your activism. That's part and parcel of who we are. Hold us accountable for our values and for doing what is best for students, right? And when that does not happen, hold us again. So, thank you for taking this time with me. And please thank Mr. Casey.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
All right.
Well, not under these circumstances.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Can we please give them a round of applause for taking the time to join us? At the beginning of the talk, Dr. Gates passed around his card. Again, if you have any recommendations, please send them an email. And as always, we have the support of the 5 cultural centers, so you can always come to us if you have questions as well. We're here to support you always. So.
And I'm going to give you this, so write this down. In case you need me directly, right, something happens, my cell phone number is 617-272-0069. 617-272-0069. Text me and say I'm a student, I need your help, right? Let's start with that. Okay, thank y'all.